So today I want to talk a little bit about the Wheel of Life, or the Fulfillment Wheel, and this is a tool that's used by a lot of coaches all over the world. And actually a simple Google of the Wheel of Life will bring up lots of varieties of this tool, lots of different ways to use it, different languages, different ways to measure. This is really a self-assessment tool, and it can be used in the context of coaching or outside of the context of coaching, just as a check-in to where you're at. I find this is a really useful tool to use in coaching to dive into areas of life that you might be experiencing more fulfillment, more of a sense of satisfaction in, and areas that you might feel less satisfied in. And then diving into maybe what it is that you want to change in those specific areas. It's a really useful coaching tool. It's also really useful just as a personal revisit. And I'll talk a little bit about an alteration to this tool, or a couple of different ways that I've adapted this tool to use it, both in one-on-one coaching and in talking about resilience. So this is the typical tool that you would see if you Googled this assessment tool online. And these categories are typically career and business, finances, health, romance or intimacy, personal growth, physical environment, fun and recreation, and family and friends. Some people will split this category, family and friends, in half because there might be a difference between your level of satisfaction in relationships with family versus friends. And there are some other distinctions to make on this. So career and business, again, those could be separate things, or there could be different businesses that you're involved in, or a career and a side business. Another distinction to make is that when we talk about a sense of satisfaction or fulfillment, typically we start with circles, like let's say this is a 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, all the way out to the outer rings, which would be, this is basically a 9 out of 10, and then the outside of the circle is a 10 out of 10 in terms of your level of satisfaction with this particular area. So a lot of times when we talk about finance, people will think, oh, well, maybe I'm not making that much money, or maybe I'm making lots of money, but there isn't a sense of satisfaction with that. So just notice that it doesn't matter the quantity of money that you're making. You may be very satisfied with very little or unsatisfied with a lot. And so that's what you're going to want to measure in this category. So it could be a 9 out of 10. In the past, maybe you've made more money but were less satisfied. So that's an important distinction, and that comes up often in finance and often with romance or intimacy, because perhaps there isn't a significant other in your life and you're perfectly satisfied with that. So then you might score it as high. The other distinction that I often make with this tool, so typically the tool that you will see is one that looks like this, although probably less messy because this is just scribbled on my whiteboard. And maybe you'll go through and you'll say, okay, fun and recreation, this is an 8. I often just write the number in here, but a lot of people will say to plot it based on the rings that you might draw. So plot 1 here, and then draw the connection between the dots. I tend to just write the numbers in each area, and then just look and see that this is, okay, that's all of them. Yeah, look and see, let's say this is a 9. Just look and notice what number is standing out to me as an area that I want to look into. Maybe it's 2. Personal growth is 2, and maybe that's an area I want to dive into in terms of coaching, or an area that I want to talk about what a 10 out of 10 would look like, what a 9 out of 10 would look like, map that out, and then allow that to define more of what we work on in coaching. If I was bringing this to my coach, for example, that's typically the way that you would see it used, either by shading it in, by plotting the dots, and for me, I just like to do this really quickly, so I just write in the numbers. So that's one way to use the fulfillment wheel or the wheel of life. What I like to do is actually just erase these categories completely. They're great as a guide, and sometimes I will use it with these pre-existing categories. And at other times I just like to have the wheel, a wheel that looks less messy than this, and start to write in my own category. So if I had a really rich, fulfilling life, what would be included? What is the context that would be included in that? So for maybe one for me is like adventure. So maybe that would be an area in a really fulfilling life. I'd have adventure. And relationships might be another one. And like for me, yeah, maybe a sense of vocation, doing something that's of purpose. So I might be using different words than the other words, but there absolutely could be overlap. Like adventure could be connected to fun and recreation. Relationships could be connected to intimacy as well as friendships and family. And vocation could be connected to career. So you can see how just me jotting down some of these categories overlaps really well with the existing wheel of life, but they're categories I created for myself, and the words that I'm using have a different energy for me. These words maybe feel a little bit more empowering, they resonate with me a little bit more, and so for me, completing the wheel with these words in mind would create something a little bit different than using, let's say, career. That's a kind of a stale word in my world. I don't love it. I don't love using the word career. Sense of vocation, that really is more compelling for me. So talking about how I feel my vocation is right now and where I might like it to be, that would be more compelling for me than using the Wheel of Life language. And so that's kind of how I use it as a wheel of life, or a fulfillment wheel for all of life. And then additionally, I'll use the wheel of life often in when talking about resilience and doing resilience coaching. So that's a key thing that I work on with Invoke coaching, is doing resilience coaching both for individuals and within organizations. And so one of the things that I find really helpful is to define what resilience looks like for individuals. And typically I'll do this after giving some information about what we know, the neuroscience of resilience and the research around resilience, what are some of the key things. So I come in with some ideas, but then it's really important to dive into what is really a key stress reduction tactic or a resilience building tactic for an individual or for a team, and then to map that out. And it may be helpful to have 8 categories, it may be helpful to have more categories. It's a circle. There can be like so many pie slices. You can create as many as you want or as little as you want. And so maybe you just want to start with four key things that would help you to build resilience. And it could be like, maybe this is a big word, self-care. And maybe a way that you define self-care as like rest time, because it could mean lots of things. So how you define self-care, rest time. Maybe another piece of resilience for you is being in nature. That says nature. And maybe you know that for you, resilience is really built through connecting with people authentically. So authentic connections. And then let's say you have one more area that's just like fun, having fun. Doing things that you really enjoy. And so you could go through this same sort of fulfillment wheel type of exercise, but it's really geared towards the things that are going to help you to manage stress and build resilience. Really, really key during this time and for a lot of the people and organizations I work with. So you might go through and rate these like currently how satisfied you're feeling about these particular areas of your resilience strategy. So lots of rest time, maybe not so or very satisfied with the rest time. You're 6 in nature, 5 in authentic connections, and 3 in fun. So this might point to what would a 10 out of 10 look like for fun, and that's where we would dive into for coaching. This can be a helpful tool to complete for yourself, and I love using a blank wheel and defining your own categories. I find it a little bit more empowering, but if you're lacking for existing categories, it's always great to have the suggestions as well. So I have the basic fulfillment wheel on my website, as well as the resilience wheel, which provides a few specific recommendations of typical things that build resilience. What can be helpful with the resilience wheel is doing an A and a B, so where you are right now versus where you would like to be. So the secondary one, where you would like to be in a period of 6 months, could maybe help you explore what that would look like in the future if you were doing what you wanted to do in terms of resilience. And it's not always, 6 months it's going to be a 10 out of 10. Sometimes right now it's a 3, and in 6 months I want it to be a 4. So your goals could be different depending on who you are and depending on the circumstances that you're in. So that's, for me, how I use the basic fulfillment wheel as well as an adaptation resilience wheel.